um, couple of reflections on some of the changes to the rules and regulations around social gatherings, and yeah, so I guess we can get started, and if other people join us, then other people join us. So, globally, 8 million cases of coronavirus.
Wow.
It's in the States, almost 8 million cases of coronavirus, but India's numbers are definitely creeping up very dramatically. I suspect that over the next few days or few weeks, India will overtake the US as the leading number of cases in the world. In the US, almost 8 million infected, 215,000 dead. And of course, this week, infected includes the president and a very large number of his sort of, inner circle of advisors and counselors. And so we can get to that and some of the reflections on that and what that's meant for the world and for the US. But maybe a little bit closer to home first. So in Ontario, there have now been a total of 55,362 cases of coronavirus. 46,000 of those have resolved, almost 47,000, which puts us about 8,600 active cases right now, which is quite a few active cases. Right now, there are 192 people in hospital. 41 of those are in intensive care units, and 26 of those people are ventilated. That's up from last week, and that's to be expected. Increasing number of cases means increasing numbers of serious cases. And there have been sort of between 500 and 700 new cases every day for the last week. A little bit up and a little bit down, sort of some days a little bit, over 700, some days, closer to 600. And that variability is really just related to how many tests are being done in any given day, when data is being reported. So I would say overall, though, the last week, there hasn't been a dramatic increase in that curve. And so although the total number of cases every day is bigger than it was in the summer, certainly when it was down, less than 100, we're not seeing exponential growth right now. We'll have to see over the next little while what happens, but the growth is slow. It's slowing down a little bit. As of right now, as of this past week. That said, there have actually been but that's province-wide. That said, there actually has been a bit of an uptick in the number of cases in Halton region. And so last week it was sort of 12 or 13 new cases a day. And it's been in the sort of mid to high 20s and even 30 new cases over the last little bit. So again, I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, if that's going to be a sustained trend and we'll see sort of, increasing numbers of cases in Halton taking off, or if that's going to settle out. But that is something that I'm certainly going to be watching for over the next little bit. Also concerning is the fact that there are an increasing number of outbreaks at retirement homes and at long-term care facilities. So in Halton, Amica and Bronte, Chartwell, Waterford, Creekway, Tansley Woods are all experiencing outbreaks right now. And Tansley Woods has 2 residents that were unwell. And that's on the backdrop of increasing numbers of cases of COVID-19 in long-term care facilities across the province after a period of fairly quiet growth there. And so that's really what we don't want to have happening. And so, much stricter regulations in terms of who is allowed in and out of long-term care facilities over the next little while. Most number of cases in Halton is in Oakville. So 61 active cases in Oakville right now. Burlington is kind of close behind with 48 active cases. Milton has 35 and Halton Hills has 24. So again, numbers kind of, increasing across the board, but maybe not quite as dramatically as they could have been. So I guess, some of the bigger changes that have happened over the last week have been around regulations and who can spend time with whom and where and when. So I think I talked about this last week. Now indoor gatherings are limited to 10, and outdoor gatherings are limited to 25. But those numbers are contingent on people being able to social distance. So that 10 within like an indoor gathering of 10 people needs to be 10 people who can be 2 meters apart, right? And so, obviously people from the same household can sit close to one another, but people who are not from the same household do need to stay further apart. So that's the rule right now, is that indoor gatherings can only have 10 people, provided that you can have physical distancing. And outdoor gatherings can have 25. But that's a little different than your safe social circle. And so that's the other recommendation that has come from the province this year, is for people to reconsider their safe social circle and to focus on interacting just with individuals that are within their own household. So previously they had opened it up to say that you could have a safe social circle of 10. So that means that people within your safe social circle can come within 2 meters of you. So if you bubble with another household, then everybody in that household can be close together. They could be within 2 meters of one another, share hugs, share food, share drinks, do all of those things, right? So that's very different than indoor gatherings of 10. That's your safe social circle. And so what the province is recommending now is that people don't bubble, that family bubbles really come to a bit of a halt, because that also seems to be a place where increasing amounts of transmission is happening. So that means those intimate gestures, hugging and sharing food and sharing drink and those kinds of things, should only be happening with people within your household, and not the broader community, not your safe social circle, not another household. Which is hard news, I think, for a lot of families, a lot of grandparents, a lot of people who had sort of, bubbled with other families and friends. But that, again, is the recommendation right now with the increasing amount of spread. That's going to make Thanksgiving a bit difficult for, I think, a lot of families. So that will mean a lot more Zoom conversations at Thanksgiving, outdoors. Maybe if it's warm enough to have a barbecue, looks like it's going to be like 22 on Sundays. So that might be an option for people, right? So to be outside, to, deep fry your turkey, and maybe spend some time outdoors, maintaining that social distancing with family and friends. But indoor gatherings, certainly indoor gatherings where food is being shared, would be a bit of a higher risk thing to do right now. Okay, another thing that I was thinking about. So one thing that I've talked about before, I think, is rates of positive tests. Now that hasn't changed very much, still well below 5%. And, the recommendation overall globally is that if your positive rate is less than 5%, you're probably doing a pretty good job picking up coronavirus infections in your community. You're probably not missing very many. But alarmingly, there are actually some communities in North Toronto, and some of the more marginalized communities where there were high rates of transmission of COVID-19 in the first wave, that now have positive test rates in the sort of 6 to 10 or even 11% range, which means that in those communities, again, where there are more marginalized populations, more poverty, more overcrowding, that probably a lot of infections are not being picked up. And so the hope is that they will be able to increase testing capacity in those communities over the next little bit, to try to slow down the spread of coronavirus there. Because that's what we know about this virus. It likes close quarters, it likes crowding, it likes people being it likes people being indoors, and that really is how it spreads. reflections on what happened in the US this week. I, I don't, I kind of don't know what to say about that. You know, we know what stops this virus from spreading. We know that social distancing and mask wearing and restricting your contacts and being outdoors and not crowding and all of those things are what stop this virus from spreading. We know that this virus is deadly. An average flu season kills between 500 and 1,500 Canadians. 1,500 Canadians dead in a flu season would be a really bad flu season. Usually it's a lot lower than that. And, you know, we're almost at 3,000 deaths already, and we're only 6 months into this pandemic. This is not flu. And so to see global leaders flaunting their disregard for human life, for safety, flouting the rules is just absolutely sickening. And I really just hope that common sense, cooler heads, rationality prevails, and that there can be some semblance of good governance and leadership there so that this doesn't keep happening. And so that's all I can say about that. I'm hopeful for two things today. One is that Trump actually tweeted that coronavirus was less deadly than the flu today, which we know is not true. That tweet was, that post was deleted by Facebook. And and Trump also shared the email address of a journalist who had criticized him on Twitter.
Really?
And Twitter not only deleted it, but actually locked his account.
Good.
There's hope. These are little signs of hope that I'm clinging to, that there's energy and sort of force behind cooler heads and our better angels, right? So that is, I guess, sort of the top line of what I'm thinking about today. It's been a bit of a tough week, looking at those antics south of the border, and really sort of hoping that, there's a small but very vocal anti-mask movement in Canada. They haven't gotten a lot of press, which I am really appreciative of. And again, I think that that's just journalistic and media responsibility, that that misinformation, that disinformation isn't being circulated broadly. But it's there, and but so far it doesn't seem to be having too much of an impact, which I think is a good thing. So are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one. I was invited, I'm not sure, people are still going to restaurants.
Yeah, right.
They were, but I don't know if you should go inside.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Restaurants remain open, movie theaters remain open, all of those places remain open, which is kind of counterintuitive when you look at the recommendations against indoor gatherings, right? So a lot of the decision to keep restaurants and bars and that kind of thing open is economically motivated and not motivated by public health. And so I would say that restaurants indoors are starting to be places where there is an increased risk of picking up COVID-19. Because within restaurants, usually people are not masked when they're sitting down. It's very difficult to maintain 6 feet of space when you're sitting around a table, especially at some smaller restaurants. And the reality is that those are circumstances where COVID-19 can be spread. Even though it's okay for the restaurants to be open, it's completely legal and allowed for the restaurants to be open. That's not a low risk environment.
So I'll cancel.
Hey, Jack, ask about testing, what we ran into today. We have a grandson with a sore throat, and his family doctor couldn't see him today. So he went to a walk-in clinic, and they talked to his dad on the phone and said because he didn't have a fever, it wouldn't be strep throat. So they recommended a COVID test. So Oakville couldn't do one until next Tuesday. They could go into Hamilton tomorrow night, or they could go to Joe Brant tomorrow at 9. So it seems to be like a mismatch of, getting a test done.
Yeah, there still is a lot of demand for testing, and there still is a lot of backlog. The guidelines for school have changed subtly over the last little bit, where if somebody has sort of one of the 4 cardinal symptoms of COVID-19, and so that's fever, cough, shortness of breath, or loss of taste and smell, if a child has any one of those 4 symptoms, that they should be going and getting COVID testing done. They should self-isolate, they should go and get COVID testing done. And then there's a very long list of secondary symptoms of COVID-19. So those are the things like a runny nose, sore throat, headache, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, muscle aches, fatigue, those kinds of things, so like pink eye, where if a child has one of those symptoms and just one of those symptoms, they may not need to go and get COVID testing done. And then when the symptoms resolve, they can go back to school. If they have more than one of those symptoms, so let's say they have a runny nose and a sore throat, or they have a headache and diarrhea, then they should get COVID testing done, and then they can go back to school pending the result of that test. And so they might want to check in with the school to see if he qualifies for that sort of secondary line of testing. Because if it really is just a sore throat and he has absolutely nothing else, the school may say it's okay for him to come back when the symptoms resolve. So, but you'd have to check with the school to make sure that they were okay with that.
But is there such a long wait in Oakville right now to have a test? Like a week?
Yep. And we're still seeing a backlog of results coming back in as well. So I had a patient who was tested on the 28th, and I just got her result today. So, and again, that's where it starts to become almost silly to sort of demand testing, because your other alternative is to, not silly to demand testing, but your other alternative is just to self-isolate for 14 days, right? And so kids can also stay home from school for the 14 days and then go back as long as they're symptom-free without getting COVID testing done. Yeah, so I know someone who ended up in Goderich getting testing because that's the closest place to get one-day testing. No, it's true. It is something that the province really still needs to get a handle on, and increase sort of testing capacity, and also decrease the number of unnecessary tests as well, right? And so, people that are getting testing or booking appointments online just because they want to know what their COVID status is without having symptoms or anything like that, there's a concern that also could be clogging up the system a little bit.
What the high intensity flu shots, are they out yet?
Yep.
Are they coming up? Yeah.
Yep, they're available. Limited. There's something that you need to go through your family doctor's office to get the high dose flu shot, but they are available. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Where you have an unusual background on your where are you in? Are you in?
I'm actually in my car right now.
Oh.
Really? Is that really in your car?
That's my sunroof. That's my window. That's the sun setting in Stony Creek. Right now I'm in my car in the parking lot of Isla's gymnastics studio.
Wow. That's great. Well, thank you for doing this. This is really, I look forward to it. And I think some of the people weren't able to get the right Zoom number. So I think that may be one of the reasons. I'm not sure. But anyway, we lucked out to get to see you. So I'm glad to see you again. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.